Many people say there are contradictions in the Bible. Do you believe that Jesus contradicts himself in the Bible? I don't. Whenever someone says there's a contradiction in the Bible, trying to disprove it, it's because there is a problem with the translation, with the translators. Does this mean there's a problem with Scripture? No, the original Scripture, the inspired word from our Father and his Son is true, is good. First, I want to read these verses because these are the controversial verses. So it says in Matthew 5:17, Jesus is speaking, of course. He says, "Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill." Then in verse 18, he says, "For assuredly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law till all is fulfilled." So you might say, well, we have the word fulfilled there used twice, at the end of verse 17, at the end of verse 18. So this helps us to understand it. But it's a little bit confusing, right? Because first Jesus, Yeshua, says, "Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets." If I stopped there, I believe those words. He's saying, don't believe that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. And then he reiterates it and says, "I did not come to destroy." Right? So first he says, don't believe I came to destroy. I did not come to destroy. He says it twice. Pretty clear. How many times does he need to say something for us to believe it? And then he says, but to, and the English translation here is fulfill. And that's the word we're going to look up in the Greek, because I believe it's a mistake. I believe that maybe at the time, maybe 500 years ago, that was the best choice of the words. But when you look at the Greek definition, when you look at what it means, and when we read the rest of chapter 17, this is the main point about this. The rest of chapter 17 here, this, what we call chapters in the Bible, the way man has divided it up, it's so normal for conversation. And Jesus, Yeshua, did this all the time. He gave parables. He told stories to try to explain the way things are, to make them understandable to us. We do it too. When you're trying to explain something to somebody, how often when you say it and maybe you see an expression of confusion on the person's face, you say, "For example," or even if you don't see expression of confusion on the person's face, you say, "For example," or "that is," right? You give you stipulate and you explain your point further. Well, Yeshua did it about 6 times in the rest of chapter 5, and you can't discard it. He defines what that fulfill means. He defines what it means. Even if we didn't have the Greek to tell us what that word fulfill meant, what it means, we have the rest of chapter 5, which clearly defines it. But it makes total sense once we go over it. But what's really interesting is then in verse 18, he says, by no means it will pass away from the law till all is fulfilled. So it would be logical maybe to assume that in the Greek, it would be the same word. But as you may know, or maybe you don't know, if you look in the Greek, they're 2 completely different verbs. They're 2 different words. They are not the same thing, and they have different meanings. So as an interpreter and translator, it makes me kind of skeptical about this is such an important passage that even at the time, I would think that the translators would have realized that it was a weak translation, especially to put the same word for 2 different verbs in Greek when they had other options, which would just create more confusion. It makes me wonder about why they did it. As an interpreter, I feel like it just causes more problems. And it did cause more problems. So let's look at those 2 words now before we go on with the rest of the chapter 2. So we have the first word, pleiru, in Greek. It's Strong's 4137. The definition here, which makes total sense now when you read the rest of chapter 5, is to make full. He is making the law and the prophets full. What are we talking about? We're talking about the law and the prophets. And this is why it's controversial to some. completely logical to others. Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. Right there. I didn't come to destroy the law. He already said he didn't come to destroy the law or the prophets. What did he come to do to the law or the prophets then? That's the question. He came to make it full. I'll read you some of the other definitions. To make it full, to fill it up, i.e., that is to fill to the full. Well, but imagine if you had a glass and the law or the prophets is it's half full, and now Yeshua fills that glass up. How? What's that? How do you fill it up? Well, we know that when you just think about what he says in the rest of chapter 5. We're going to go over those examples. He shows us how it filled it up. Because the law or the prophets were, don't do this. But now we know in chapter 5, the examples he's saying, in your heart, in your mind, that's what's important. 2, do the one and don't not do the other also. We'll talk about it more specifically, but I want to first give the definition of that second word, fulfill. So in the second one, he says, not one jot or tittle will by any means pass from the law till all is fulfilled. Now that word is ginomai in the Greek. And that one means, it has many possible meanings. One of them is to come to pass or to happen. One jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law. One jot or tittle, that's one little line, a dot of the I, the tiniest little line in Hebrew. Not one jot or tittle will pass by no means from the law till all is fulfilled, till all comes to pass, till all has happened. It must have been an issue, right? There must have been an issue that people were saying, he came to destroy the law or the prophets. He's saying, no. Why else would he bring this up? Why would Jesus, Yeshua, bring this up and say, I'm not coming to destroy the law unless it was an issue? If something's not an issue, then you don't need to talk about it. This was an issue, and he wanted to clear it up. So then he even gives examples. He gives the examples. So now we know the two meanings. They're two different words. One means to fill to the full, to make full. So let's see how he makes them full. You know the most famous ones. He says, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery in her heart. So you have, don't commit adultery. We know that the commandment. Now he's saying, don't even feel it or think about it. That lust, right? It's the heart, the mind part of it. Of course. So is he saying, don't think about adultery, but you can commit adultery physically as long as you don't think about it? We would say that's impossible. But he's not saying that. The law, the original law, still stands. He did not come to destroy the law of the prophets. He came to make it full. That's what the word means, to make it full. Let's look at another one. This is in verse 43. You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies. And then he continues. And all the other examples about turning the other cheek. If someone asks you to walk a mile with them, go an extra mile. If they want a jacket, give them your coat. It's always more. And then he says it himself. I skipped this verse on purpose, but in verse 20, Jesus says, for I say to you that unless your righteousness, what is righteousness? The extent that how well you keep the law. That's the definition of righteousness in the Bible. If it's not, please tell me what you think righteousness is, what Jesus meant by righteousness in verse 20. For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. It all makes sense, right? He's saying, I did not come to destroy the law or the prophets. I came to fill it up, to make it full. How did he make it full? Someone hit you on the right cheek, turn your left. If somebody asks for this, give them more. It's always more. It's not less. And it's not throwing out the law and the prophets. He says that he establishes it. Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I came to make it more. I came to fill it up. then all the rest of the scriptures make sense. We'll look at this some more in the next message.